Does anybody have any questions before we start? We got to chat a lot on Monday, but no, cool. Zoomers. Well, then I'm super excited to invite my friend Vikram, or to introduce my friend Vikram. So Vikram Kundanya is a professor of extension in the Department of Human Ecology, and he's our evaluation specialist. So his PhD is in ag education and evaluation, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you so much, Vikram. So whenever I am stuck with wondering, like, how do I evaluate this thing, or how do I ensure that I'm making a difference, or how do I even like make a focus group work, then Vikram saves me. So I really appreciate it. He's going to spend evaluating programs, particularly extension programs, but a lot of the things he talks about today and Monday are going to be useful broadly. It's a really big, like even the dean said on Monday, right? Like being able to measure the impact of what you do and the contribution of what you do to greater society is really important to tell our story. And so Vikram's going to spend 2 days with us, one online, one live, right, on Monday, walking through different evaluation methodologies and just kind of helping us through. And you can stop him and ask questions at any time, I'm sure. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Vikram. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I'll share my PowerPoint and you can let me know if you all are able to see it. Are you able to see the PowerPoint?
Yeah, as the whole PowerPoint, not the slides. Oh, there you go. Perfect.
It's good now?
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. As Amanda just introduced me, I am the evaluation specialist at University of California, Davis, and I'm the evaluation state leader for UC extension system, the cooperative extension system. So I'll do this as two presentations. Today, I'll focus on planning and designing evaluations. And next week, we'll get to the data collection methods and those details. So for today, this is the outline that I'll be following. I'll start off talking about what the difference is between evaluation and research, because we pretty much use the same data collection methods and also the method, everything is pretty similar. So I'll spend a little bit of time talking about how evaluation is different from research. Then I'll present the steps in evaluation planning. So I have identified this from one particular literature source, that is University of Wisconsin Extension, which is considered to be one of the top-notch sources for extension evaluation in the country and also worldwide. Regardless of the terms or the names different sources may use for these steps, the essence is captured in these 5 steps. After that, I hope to go for 45 to 50 minutes talking about these 2 things. Then we'll take a 10-minute break. And after that, I'll wrap up the lecture talking about program logic model and the different types of outcomes, because this is really important requirement from USDA extension, expectations, grant writing, everything. Then I'll talk about indicators, and there will be like a very brief activity where we'll work on identifying indicators for whatever program you choose, right? Your program that you want to develop and evaluate. We'll choose, and I'll wrap it up with the question answer session. And as Amanda said, please feel free to stop me anytime if you have any question. Amanda, can you please monitor the chat and stop me?
Yeah, and I wonder did you mean to, or we're still looking at the first slide, the title slide. Did you advance the slides?
Yeah, maybe I have to stop and share again. This happens again. Like
I wondered, 'cause-
The
oh,
outline
yeah,
now.
perfect. Now we're good. Now we're where we think we
Yeah,
are.
we'll
Got
see
it.
like how, if it goes to the next slide or maybe it
Yeah.
finishes here. So this is what I was talking about. So I'll cover these 4 topics. There will be a very brief activity, the indicators activity, and then question answer session. Are you able to
Perfect.
see the next slide now?
Yep, it's perfect. Difference between evaluation and.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So as I worked as an evaluation specialist over the years, this is the major differences. These are the major differences that I have focused on in my work, and also I pulled it from a literature source. So the areas where there is a stark difference between evaluation and research, or the purpose for which each of it is carried out. For evaluation, the primary purpose is to make a judgment and give specific recommendations to that particular case. Like we call it as evaluand, the object that we are evaluating. So give specific recommendations and provide judgments is really important. It is evaluation actually. And whereas research is usually like a value neutral pursuit, right, to contribute to the existing knowledge base. With evaluation, the focus is not that much on contributing to the knowledge base. There is an evaluation research part that is different, but if it is like a program evaluation where the intention is not to contribute to the existing knowledge base, providing judgments is the key. And when it comes to decision-making power in an evaluation, it is essential, not like an option, but it's an essential thing to include all the clients, funders, and every other stakeholder. Like maybe they are primary stakeholders for you, or maybe they have an indirect stake. But it is important to involve everyone throughout the process, right from assessing the needs until you report out. Like you share your findings, the evaluation findings with the clients, the funders, whoever it is. It has to be like a participatory process. Whereas participatory research is important, but the decisions can be made sometimes primarily by the researcher, consulting the literature through a thorough literature review. Coming to the questions, the big picture questions, again, all the stakeholders need to be involved in coming up with the evaluative questions. I'll talk more about what an evaluative question is and how that is different from a data collection question. Whereas in research, the questions can be formulated by the research team. Again, as I said, consulting the literature and whatever has happened until then. And the competencies required in evaluation or for an evaluator are all the research competencies, because the methods are pretty similar. In addition to that, interpersonal effectiveness, planning and management, political maneuvering when it comes to making the evaluation findings get used. Those are also the skills that are very important. An evaluator ideally has to wear multiple hats, but not every evaluator may be able to do that, but that is a plus. Whereas in research, it is primarily research design methods theory, whether it is social science or physical science or natural science. Coming to the role of theory in evaluation theory, regardless of the context of evaluation being whatever, right? Like the topic of evaluation can be like an agronomy, biology, or a social science, like environmental justice, whatever may be the topic area of the program. Social science theory is also important. The program theory, the evaluation theory, the frameworks. The evaluator should be versed with that, even if they are not like very well knowledgeable in these theories, they should consult those theories. And then for research, it's primarily the discipline-specific theories, right? Whether it is social science or any other science, it's discipline-specific theories are important to come up with the frameworks. And then coming to the utility part, for evaluation, it is utilization focused. So an evaluation is only as useful as the usability of its findings. If the evaluation findings are not put into use, then the purpose of evaluation is not served. Whereas the utility part at a practical level, how people are going to immediately use it is not thought of as critically at all the stages in research. I'm not saying that it's not important, but there is some research which is always not practically directly applicable to our stakeholders at that moment of time. Then coming to the validity part, validity is the use part. With evaluation, this is very, very important to remember that the validity is very limited. The generalizability part, the external validity is very limited. The lessons learned from a particular evaluation can be generalizable, but not necessarily the findings, because every evaluation is grounded in a cultural context. I'll talk about it in the next slide. Whereas in research, external validity is very important, like controlling the factors, the variables, and then being able to generalize the findings to similar populations or similar settings is very important in research, which is not the case in evaluation. And coming to the standards by which each of these are governed, the American Evaluation Association identifies accuracy, utility, feasibility, and propriety as the main standards for evaluation. You can, for more information on these, under each of these standards, there is like a list of substandards. You can go to the website and see. By accuracy, it is the intention to increase the dependability and the truthfulness of the results. So that is what is accuracy. And utility, as I said, how relevant is it to the needs of the people or the program that we are evaluating? That's the utility part. Feasibility is mainly to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of evaluations. People who are evaluating the programs should be knowledgeable in evaluation methods and everything. Most of the times, or at least quite a few times, the evaluators on grants, they are experts in research methods with limited to no experience in evaluation. So that doesn't actually work well most of the times. And then propriety is about doing it in a proper, fair, legal, and just way. That is really important. And a participatory approach, which I'll talk about in the next slide, will take care of that. Whereas in research, the validity, the content validity, the construct validity, face validity, and the causality are the main standards with which we judge a research. So I spend a little bit of time on types and frameworks of evaluation that I use in my work and are mostly used in extension or recommended in extension. So under the types, needs assessment, some people consider it as a step that happens before what they call evaluation, but some people identify it as a part of evaluation. Program development and evaluation are taken together. So at the needs assessment phase, it determines what is essential for existence or performance of a program and to help set priorities, right? So this is the stage where we are identifying the needs to develop a program. So this is a very important stage in all the extension program development. Then process evaluation it's called as a formative evaluation because it happens during the project lifetime, and it examines what goes on while a program is in progress. The main purpose for which we carry out this process evaluation is to make any changes as needed. Like still there is scope to make changes. The next one is outcomes evaluation. We'll see when we get to the logic model how we define outcomes. So outcomes evaluation is this determines what results from a program and its consequences for people. So when we talk about consequences, it is more the impact part. Sometimes most of the times, impact happens after the funding period. We need to wait for more time because impact is defined as the big picture changes happening at societal level beyond the people whom we serve through a program. So that is the part. The outcomes evaluation is measuring the outcomes, immediate outcomes, and also assessing the impact. Yeah, and the last one is impact evaluation, which determines the effects of program beyond its immediate results. So we can get up to maybe making the people adopt what we are teaching, right? But what happens as a result of adoption over a long term is actually defined as the impact. So coming to the frameworks, these are the four frameworks that I use and most of the extension people are advised to use or use, like my colleagues, most of them use. As I said, participatory approach, this is actually, according to me, it is essential, not an option, to involve the stakeholders of a program or policy in the evaluation process. Again, we have to define who the primary stakeholders are or who the secondary stakeholders are. And the extent and type of involvement, at what stages they should be involved, from needs assessment to reporting the findings, that differs with the context and also the type of program. And again, that has to be like a participatory decision-making process. And then the next one is utilization focused. So this is actually the base for all the frameworks or different theories that are coming out. This was proposed by Dr. Michael Patton, who is considered one of the gurus of evaluation globally. So what he says in his book, if people are if any of you is interested in pursuing a career in extension evaluation, I would highly recommend to read this book. This is very easy to read, a very practical one. So this is what he says is evaluation is done for and with specific intended primary users. So you have to be thinking about how the evaluation findings will be used right from the beginning, and then involve the people. It's not like an afterthought. Okay, we come up with some methods, we collect data and we report, but the utility part has to be thought of right from the beginning for the different stakeholders, and who are the primary stakeholders is a decision that you have to make. Then this is kind of a build-up of the utilization focused developmental evaluation approach. And this approach is basically, you have an overall plan, overall logic model getting into a program with anticipated outcomes, but the outcomes themselves change based on the context of the program, because most of the programs operate in a complex setting. So it's not easy to always anticipate the outcomes. So it's developmental in that sense. And then culturally responsive, everything that we define, the criteria, everything has to be done in the culture and context in which a program is operating. For example, what can be considered a successful achievement for one particular group of people or a particular area or a particular context may not be considered a success at the same level for another group. So cultural factors, contextual factors, baseline, everything has to be considered. So there is not a number that you can give and assume that it's considered success or failure for every particular setting. So I'll now get into steps in evaluation planning. So these are the 5 steps that I use, and how I kind of make people, whoever I work with, mostly our extension advisors in counties, to make them think through how you will do each of these things. And I pose like a set of questions under each of these steps, and that helps with the process. So the number 1 step is, as I discussed until now, engaging the stakeholders. And what are the different things that you need to consider? We'll see in the next slide. And then once that is done, focusing the evaluation. And after that is taken care, then collecting the data, right? Like we need to collect data in order to make judgments. Then analyzing and interpreting the data that we collect through whatever methods, quantitative, qualitative. And finally, the last and the most important step, according to me, is use evaluation results. Without the results getting used, the evaluation, the purpose of the evaluation is not served. So the number 1 question, or the thing that we should be thinking under engaging stakeholders, is who are our stakeholders? Are we missing any important players? It happens sometimes that we don't kind of take into consideration every stakeholder for a particular program. So we need to think about it very clearly at the beginning stages of the project. And then once that is done, as I said, how frequently and at what stages should they be involved? Not every stakeholder needs to be involved at every stage of the program development and implementation process, but nonetheless, they need to be informed, right? Everyone should be informed what's happening, even if they were not involved at every stage. And then the most important thing that I experienced is what will motivate the stakeholders to get involved with the project. Initially, when we kick off a project, there is a lot of interest, a lot of stakeholders show up. But as the project progresses, especially when it's a very long program, the interest fades out, and it's not easy to keep the stakeholders motivated and involved throughout the project. So some of the methods or techniques that we have used, me or my colleagues have used in our work, are telling the purpose of the project or the research, whatever is going on, telling the purpose of the program very clearly and telling them what value they bring by being involved in this. So the psychology literature actually identifies that it's a natural human tendency to help to society if they see that they are contributing to a bigger cause. So telling them the anticipated impact, what they'll bring to the table by being involved in this project may work. And sometimes extension is all about relationships, right? Like cultivating relationships with your clients, with your farmers, or with your people living in the community. So through those relationships, fostering those relationships can also keep people motivated and involved. And sometimes, like for one of my projects, actually we built in a stipend for stakeholder participation. We would cover their travels, we would cover their meals. If there's a grant, if it allows for that kind of a thing, then thinking about it and building some budget, writing in some budget for stakeholder participation is has worked for us in that one particular project. And also, like if we don't have money to cover the travels or anything like that, another method that can work is giving like some kind of recognition, a souvenir, some kind of an appreciation may also motivate people. Now coming to the next step, that is focusing the evaluation. So the number one thing we need to be very clear about is what is the purpose of our evaluation? Like, why are we evaluating? Is it for accountability purposes? Or is it for program improvement purposes? Or is it for our learning purpose? That we have to be very clear about. Because based on the purpose, the methods, everything will be determined. So it's very clear for what purpose we are evaluating a particular thing. Then we'll get to this after the break. What is the program logic or theory of change? So basically, like some kind of a theory of change. If we do this, why do we think a certain thing will happen? And if that certain thing happens, how will that lead to a long-term impact? So some kind of a logic, which can be built on your experience with programming or by consulting literature. But there has to be some logic. Like if you input all this and do certain activity, like training or research or whatever, why do you think certain type of outcome is possible? And if that outcome is achieved as we measure it, right? We'll get to that in next week. Why, like what is the anticipated impact? What does the literature suggest? If people adopt a certain behavior, what is it contributing to in the long term? So program logic or theory of change is really important. And then the next question is, what are the evaluative questions or what are the evaluation questions? So it is very important to understand that these are different from our data collection questions. So these are the big picture questions that drive your evaluation. And these questions are needed even if your project involves no primary data collection. Like even if you are only using your secondary data sources like reports or any literature or anything to come to to evaluate a program, like existing records, if you're checking those to evaluate a program, even then these evaluative questions are important. So these are the big picture questions that will drive your evaluation. So some examples of big picture questions that I have used in my projects in Wisconsin and here. One is, how worthwhile is the program corresponding to the inputs, all the inputs that have gone into the program? Is it worthwhile, right? That's a big picture question. So I'm not collecting any data. I'm not going to ask this question to any of my people from whom I'll collect data through surveys or interviews or whatever. So this is a big picture question. Another example for a big picture question is, how relevant is the program to the needs of stakeholders. So basically, it is getting at the point, was a thorough needs assessment done? And if it was done, were the needs that were identified prioritized properly? So that is what this question is driving. And then what will be the indicators of success? So we have evaluative questions. So we have our data collection questions, right? We have to write the data collection questions. So what will be the indicators of our success? I'll get into this after the break. And we'll also have an activity, a brief activity to practice thinking about what is an indicator. And then what will be the evaluation design, whether it will be a qualitative or a quantitative design or a mixed methods. So the gold standard, according to me, and also according to the latest literature, is mixed methods. Like you have to use both qualitative and quantitative, and to the extent possible within qualitative and also quantitative multiple methods. So if we collect data from multiple methods and also mixed methods, we can be more confident about our findings, and we can be able to make judgments. As I said, evaluation needs judgments. We can make it with more confidence. The next step is collecting data. So the number one thing to think about there are, what are the different data sources that are available? Sometimes we overlook the data sources that are available, like for example, county extension reports, or like federal reports, or scientific literature. If it is like still relevant, right? If a previous needs assessment was done in the last 2 years or something in the county, the new person joining the job, the new farm advisor, he or she doesn't need to conduct a needs assessment again because it's still relevant, right? It's only 2 years, but try to kind of validate that through some other reports also, in addition to the needs assessment report that the predecessor left for you, right? So that's, think about all the data sources that are available. And then most of the times it happens to be our clientele or the stakeholders from whom we will collect the data through surveys or interviews. And what methods can utilize to collect data? So here, thinking about some kind of innovative methods will help a lot. I'll share a couple of methods that I used in my work, which I think are innovative. That will kind of give us more data, more participation. Otherwise, as we all know, with surveys, the response rate is not that encouraging because of various factors, survey fatigue being one of them. So thinking about different types of methods and innovative methods to the extent possible is good. And what questions should I ask the survey validation panel and pilot tester? So these are the data collection questions when we talk about pilot testers. So this is a very, very important step, which quite a few people don't take care of these two steps, these 2 points that well. So when we say survey validity, it relates to the purpose. Like you have some questions in your survey or in your question, like whatever questionnaire or whatever data collection instrument that you are using. So the validation part is to make sure that, okay, if I collect this data, does this help me in answering my evaluative question? So that is the thing, and it is usually done by an expert validation panel. And these experts, it is good to have the people who are not that much involved with your evaluation or research, so that they can tell you, okay, if you ask this question, you get this particular type of data. So how will that contribute to a certain outcome or my evaluative question? And coming to the pilot testing, it is mainly for reliability of the data collection instrument. By reliability, what we mean is, does everyone who will take this survey understand the question without any confusion? So it's not related to the validity part. It's not about whether the question is giving you proper data to answer your question, but this is like, if the question is giving you an answer that's not confusing, like everyone understands that in the correct way in the population of the people that you are reaching out to. So an easy way to remember is a questionnaire or a data collection instrument can be reliable without being valid. So that is the important thing that we have to remember. So reliability is, pilot testing takes care of that. So reliability is only, are the people understanding the question without any confusion. But that doesn't mean that it is giving you the data that is required to answer your research question. So that is a very important thing to understand. And if you are wanting to publish in a peer-reviewed outlet, if you don't talk about reliability and validity, most likely the manuscript may get rejected. Yeah, this is again, what questions will I ask while collecting data? So this is not the evaluative question. This is your data collection question, whether it is a survey question or an interview question, whatever it is, a focus group question. These are those questions, and you should think very clearly what questions you will ask, because there is a natural tendency to ask more questions than what is needed, keeping in mind some other purposes. Okay, we can collect this data and use it for something else. So we need to resist the temptation. Like everyone goes through that temptation, because again, as I said, there's survey fatigue, which is a reality. So instead of sending out 2 different surveys, people may think, okay, let us add 2 or 3 questions. So we have to find a balance. And one way of finding this balance is to think that, am I including the questions that are directly related to my anticipated outcomes? And then the unanticipated outcome can be kind of covered in an open-ended question. Are there any other comments, or like, do you have anything else to share about the project or something like that? Keeping the questionnaire short is really important. And then thinking about the sample, right? Whether it's a purposive sample, or you want to do like a random sample, which is the golden standard, a simple random sample, or stratified sampling, whatever. But to the extent possible, we have to avoid a convenience sample. Convenience sample, again, is already biased, because whoever shows up, we are collecting data from them, which is like very low in validity part. And again, if it is for a peer-reviewed publication, a convenience sample, the reviewers are very strict with convenience samples. But sometimes that is all we get, right? Regardless, despite all our good efforts, that is the only sample that we have. Then I'm not saying that it's not valid from that perspective, but since it is a convenience sample, it is already self-selected. So we have to keep that in mind. So for example, convenience sample is whoever attends our extension programs, right? And then whoever responds. So we need to make an effort to reach out to representatives population. So this is an innovative method, a couple of innovative methods that I said I'd share. I did this for one of our extension programs here in the University of California Cooperative Extension Service. So this was an environmental education program. I don't know, that's a food, like a nutrition program, where the kids were being taught how to eat healthy. So we came up with a survey kind of a thing, which we termed it as pizza surveys. I'll show the method also in the next slide. So basically, like 4 statements related to each of the outcomes. Again, as I said, they have to be related to the outcomes, were presented above a large pizza images mounted on a magnetic board. And the statements, again, I said, were developed in collaboration with the program staff who delivered that program. I visited the program, I observed before developing the questions. But as I said, participatory approach is really important, because me as an evaluator going in and deciding what we should measure is a big mistake, because I don't understand the context. They are the people who have been involved more. So I have to sit with them and then develop the data collection questions. And then each pizza image had 3 slices representing different answers, like yes, maybe, no. And each student received 4 toppings with magnetic bags to answer each of these questions. So I'll just share a video now so you can understand what I'm talking about. Are you able to hear me? Hear the video?
Yeah, you can hear it.
Okay, so this is the next activity we're going to do, and it's kind of special. It's something new that we're trying today. So you're the first class to get to try it with us, which is very exciting. So this is just something for a game, in a gamer activity that we are going to try to learn a little bit about what you learned today. So here's how it's going to go. Dun, 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 dun. Drum roll, please.
Drum roll.
Pizzas! Okay, so did everybody, if you enjoyed making pizzas today, we thought we would keep going with pizzas. So we've got on the front of this board and on the back of this board 4 total pizzas. So the back of the board has another 2 pizzas. I can spin it around, but you'll get to walk and see. Each of these pizzas has a different sentence on it. So this first one is, making lunch today makes me want to help with cooking at home. The second one, I liked having different vegetables on my pizza today. The third one says, I enjoyed making lunch with my classmates today. And the fourth one says, after today, I want to learn more about. And then you get to choose between gardening, cooking meals, or raising farm animals. So how this is gonna go is that your teacher is giving each of you 4 little pizza toppings. And they each have a little magnet on the back. And you get to use them to vote for the answer that you want on all of the 4. So you have 4 pizza toppings, and we have 4 questions. So you'll use one topping, and you put it on the pizza where you want it to go. So it looks, each pizza, can you see, is in 3 slices? They're all like that. So when we finish our cookies and we're feeling nice and full and satisfied and ready to get up and move around again, we'll each come up with our toppings and answer on the pizza how you're feeling about the sentence. So if I have a little piece with can I borrow this for a second? Okay, so someone, it doesn't matter what topping you put where, right? Because we know that all kinds of different things can go on pizzas. So when you come out, making lunch today makes me want to help with cooking at home. If you say, yeah, it does make me want to help with cooking at home, you can put your topping in the yes category, on the yes slice. If it maybe makes you want to help with cooking at home, maybe not, you can put it on the maybe slice. And if you're feeling like, what I did today doesn't make me want to help with cooking at home, you can put it in the not today slice. And they're all like that. Okay, any questions? Yeah.
To me, what if we don't know which one we want to do?
If you don't know which one you want to do and you really can't decide, you can put it to the side. But I would encourage you to try and decide.
Okay, so that's you get the essence, right? So that is how we used it. So it is still a survey, kind of a survey. We had more participation, and this is the data, like people are responding. So we counted all these numbers and then inputted into an Excel sheet. So this is still a survey, but a more fun way for kids to take the survey. So such kind of an innovative thinking is gives us like more valid data and more response also. Another method that I used while I was in Wisconsin is a group mapping activity. So this was for a 4-H residential 1-week-long camp. So the overall goal of the camp was to promote systems understanding about how the different components on a farm work together to give out whatever comes out of the farm. So we asked, like, the students were divided into 5 groups, and we asked them to draw how they understand these systems, like how the systems work differently, like different components work on a farm. And the maps on the left-hand side are the maps on the day 1, and the ones on the right-hand side are the maps on the last day, the day 5. So we said that you could use the same chart paper and keep improving it, or you can use a new one. And we used to evaluate this at the end of each day using a quantitative metric or metrics also. I'll show that in the next slide. But we can clearly see there's a lot of, visually, we can see that there's a lot of improvement from day 1 to day 5, right? So the main advantage we observed with this method is this is not only like an evaluation method, but this is also a teaching method, like a learning method for them, like they're representing what they're learning. So this also, we felt it was an innovative method, and we published this method and all the other methods we used in that camp, mixed and multiple methods, in Journal of Youth Development. I can share that paper with Amanda, and if anyone is interested, they can read that paper. So this is the quantitative evaluation criteria we used to evaluate each of those maps. And we used ANOVAs to kind of come up with the quant part. And they showed the same thing. There was a statistically very significant improvement from day 1 to day 5, which kind of was found through the visual observation also. So that gave us more confidence to make any evaluative findings. And then we used a participant observation method also, which I'll talk next week. By using that method, actually, one of the things that came out was on one of these evaluation criteria, I think it was, do the maps reflect changes in the season of the year on the farm? Everyone was getting a zero, consistent zero on that, all the 5 groups. Then when we were discussing what was happening, all the educators were focused on what they were doing wrong with the teaching method or their teaching part. But the reality was that there were like different workstations and each person was assuming that someone else was teaching it. Only because I was there observing all 5 days, like a participant observation method, I was able to see that no one was teaching it. So then I shared, there's nothing wrong with the teaching learning process, but no one is covering that particular topic. But once that was taken care by in day 2 and day 3, the kids started showing improvement in the maps about this particular criteria also. So the next step is analyzing and interpreting the data. So this is very important, and most of the times people don't remember or maybe don't do that, to have a clear analysis plan. So have the questions, evaluative question very clearly. What are all your variables? What are the independent variables? What are the dependent variables? Some analysis can always evolve, but everything, if it's done as an afterthought, is not correct. We have to kind of be clear about our analysis plan and what type of statistics or qualitative analysis we want to run. And then this is really, really important with qualitative data, when it is like predominantly qualitative design. What am I doing to address my own bias? So it is always like almost not possible that we don't have any inherent bias. We may not know that, but we most likely all of us will have some kind of a bias that we may not know. So just take steps to address that, right? Have a team, do member checks, that kind of a thing. So assuming that we don't have any bias is the biggest bias, which we can do like a qualitative research. And then as I said, am I able to triangulate data, like using multiple methods and mixed methods will take care of this. And then can I involve stakeholders in analyzing and interpreting results? This is really important in evaluation. My colleague, Professor Franz, she calls it a data party. But in my projects, I have not been able to get to the stage of sitting with my stakeholders and analyzing the data. But I make sure in every project, when I analyze the data analysis plan, the questions are like developed in a participatory way. After my initial analysis is done, then I present the initial findings at stakeholder meetings. And then people ask the types of analysis they want, and then we decide and do it. So I've involved people with interpreting results very much, but not so much with analyzing, but that's the recommended practice. If you can involve people in data analysis also, that's really good. Then the last step is use of evaluation results. So you have to always think about what are the various outlets for sharing, like not only one method, right? Like a report or a peer-reviewed publication or a conference presentation, but consider all the different venues, like any meetings, governmental meetings, evaluation results have to be shared. And then for that, keeping that in mind, we need to have different formats, right? Long reports don't work at all. We still need to submit a very long report to the funding agency, but with all the appendices, everything, but infographics, very short reports. I'll show a couple of examples. Will be good. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. What is the best reporting format for a particular type of audience? If it is your science colleagues, peer-reviewed publication, long reports, all the data analysis details, everything is good, but it depends, right, who your stakeholder is. And then keeping this in mind, it's always good to consider budgeting services for graphic artists, because not everyone, at least for me, I can say, I have to rely on my students. I can do some basic PowerPoint and those kind of things, but to really make it like a very good infographic, I have to rely on someone. So I always see, like, if I have budget or if I have network to reach out to. If I don't have budget, then think how I'll handle this, because that's important. Like one pagers, these are like really important. And then if you are writing in a budget for a graphic artist or a project manager, the standard, it's not a standard, but a rule of thumb, like kind of a rough kind of a rule, is to budget 10% of the total budget of evaluation for project management and graphic artist. So these are a couple of examples. I was involved with evaluating a healthy soils project for NRCS people. And also, no, this one was for Pioneer company CDM employees. So there was 3 phases. There was a pilot test. So this involved an online course and then a field day. So the people were students, we call them students. So students were expected to take the online course and then come to the field day. So we did a pilot test. So all we came up with, this is the only thing we submitted to the funder, because this is what they ask. Only one page of this is like pilot test, training results, evaluation, right? The second was like online courses. Again, this is pilot test. So what was the online course evaluation? So that is the second handout. And the third one is a 6-month follow-up, just to see to what extent the people are following what was taught in the online course and also in the field day. So this is the 6-month follow-up. So no big reports, nothing. They just wanted 3 one-pagers. And then this is another example. This is the climate change project that was led by Purdue. So this is one of the end products. So this we'll talk right now. After this, we'll take a break and come back. We'll talk about program logic model. So these are the different, the educational box, the action box, or the vision box are the different levels of outcomes that we wrote into the project grant submission, grant proposal. And then we gave the results. This is from the summative evaluation, outcomes measurement, the last end of project survey we did for that. So under each of those, we just gave like awareness or like whatever we identified as outcomes, we gave it as this handout. So this, there was a very big report also submitted, but this was also one of the products that came out of the project. So we'll take a 10-minute break now. And then once we return, we'll talk about logic model and indicators activity.
Great. Thanks so much, Vikram. I'm going to pause you.
Are you able to see the slide?
Yeah, it's back to the slides and away from mine.
Okay. Now I'll present for the next few minutes about program logic model and how it can be used in program development and evaluation. So a logic model is one of the frameworks or tools that you can use for program development and evaluation. But this is the one that's being required by USDA, the United States Department of Ag, for most of its grant proposals. And also all the extension evaluation units throughout the country, and to my understanding outside the US also use this. So I thought that it is good to get spend some time on this. So a logic model basically is a simplified picture of a program, initiative, or intervention that is a response to a given situation. So as I said before, this is like kind of cultivating the thinking of what happens as a result of doing a particular thing. So the program logic model, the theory of change part, comes into the picture here. So this framework shows the logical relationships among the resources that are invested, the inputs, that activities that take place, logic model defines them as outputs, and the benefits are changes that result in the lives of people for whom a program is being developed. The logic model identifies that as outcomes. Then there is this question happening all over the profession, whether this logic model can be used only in evaluation or for program planning and design also. I think it can be used for both, and I have used a logic model to guide both my program planning, development, and evaluation, all 3 components. So this is basically a template for a logic model. The first box is inputs. The second box is outputs. And again, there are 2 components within outputs, all the activities that you do, and the people, the participation part, the people who you reach out to through your program. So those are classified under outputs. I'll share some examples in the coming slides. And then the outcomes are identified at 3 different levels. Short-term outcomes, mostly these are learning outcomes. as a result of attending your program, or like will the people increase their knowledge, their awareness? It's a very short term at the end of the event kind of a thing. Then the medium term is mostly action outcomes or adoption outcomes. You teach something, or the people adopting that. I'm mainly presenting it in an extension education context. This can be used for research design also. And then the long-term outcomes, which is equivalent to impact, right? The anticipated impact, what's happening with the big picture, beyond the direct participants in the program, the societal changes. And then this logic model also helps you think about the assumptions that you have to make, why a certain thing is possible, and then the external factors like funding. What are the different external factors that will determine or influence your program? So this is a basic template. We'll use this during the activity after a few minutes now, but also next week when we get to that stage. So there is a lot of confusion with people that I work with, especially when it comes to outputs and outcomes. So I'll spend a little bit of time kind of presenting how to understand these different terms. So outputs, as I said, are all the activities you do, the trainings, the materials that you develop, the brochures, everything, the activities you do, and participation, who you reach out to. Is it your farmers or community people or the funders or the government officials? That is the outputs. Then outcomes, the results you want to achieve as a result of your educational program, right? As I said, they can be short, medium, or long term. And then this is one of the things that is often overlooked, to be thinking about unanticipated or unintended outcomes that can happen as a result of your project, both positive and negative, which we don't know now, or which we are not thinking about. We can't think about them now. But as the program is implemented, there can be possibility for unintended outcomes. So there has to be a plan how to record that. And some of the ways that you can do it is asking like open-ended questions or observing the programs, like a participant observation method. So impact is the long-term outcome. Impacts are usually related to changes in social, economic, civic, and environmental conditions. UC extension system calls these as condition changes, like the big picture condition changes in the long term. Impacts can be measured for a very long running extension programs because we need to have like a longitudinal data to be able to measure impact. But most of the times we will have to rely on research related to medium term outcomes to assess the anticipated impact. For example, like if we get to the stage of measuring, are people eating healthy as a result of attending our nutrition educational programs? And if we have recorded that data for multiple years, then there is sufficient research showing that if people eat healthy, the incidence of cardiovascular disease or any other such kind of other metabolic diseases like diabetes, like those kind of things, we will go down significantly. There is already a proven research. So if we get to the point of measuring that people are eating healthy, we can easily, like reasonably kind of tell that, okay, my program is contributing to the long-term health of the people. So that is the private value, right? Like the people who are attending your program are eating healthy. So that is the private value they are deriving, like your training participants or your program participants. But then there is this public value component. What is in it for the people, the taxpayers of the state who are not attending extension programs? What is the benefit for them? So the overall public health costs will decrease if people eat healthy and if people are like eating healthy and maintaining a healthy lifestyle. The overall public health costs go down. So that is the big picture public value from a private extension program, like private in the sense for limited people, right? So there are other ways to understand outputs because there is a confusion. I just wanted to present a few ways that I have used to teach how to differentiate outputs and outcomes. So outcome is something that comes out of a program, right? Like you do this program and then what's happening in the people's lives is an outcome. Output, whereas, is under the control of a project team. Like you can deliver a training program, you can design a training program, you can come up with a brochure, you can reach out to the people, right? That is all you do. And there is a program logic, right, for why you do and what you anticipate. But regardless of that, the extent of achievement of the outcome is not under our control, right? We can't control the level of accomplishment. We may assume that, okay, people will change this much knowledge level, but we are not really sure about it. We have a few other ways. Outcome is so what of an output. I do this training, I develop this educational material. So what? What's changing as a result of that is an outcome. And impact is so what of an outcome, right? Like, okay, people increase knowledge, people are adopting what I'm teaching. So what's resulting as a result of that? What's the big picture change that's happening? A few other ways, a short-term outcome like knowledge change or awareness change or whatever is something you expect, at least expect to see as a result of your program. A medium-term outcome, again, adoption, behavior change is something that you like to see as a result of your program. And long-term impact, like long-term outcome or impact, is something that you love to see as a result of your program. So this is a Journal of Extension publication you can read, which clearly talks about these outcome success indicators. And this is how we can try to understand what a short-term, medium-term, and long-term outcome is. So then I'll just present some examples of outputs from all the extension programs that I have evaluated so far and also identified in the literature. So what you do part, right? So these can be workshops is an output, meetings, any services that you provide, other services, the videos you create, the blog posts you write, the brochures you develop, the fact sheets, the curriculum that you develop to teach a particular program, any counseling services you provide, the extension provides, and the evaluation activity itself. These are all like outputs. And working with media, like activity, right? So this is the output. And the second component of outputs, participation, right? Who you reach out to is your participants, direct participants, program participants, any other primary and secondary stakeholders or clients, agencies that have a stake in the program, and decision makers, funders, political leaders, and any other customers. And some sources identify satisfaction as an output. And if that is how your grant proposal has to identify it, then you have to put it as satisfaction as an output. But some people identify it as a short-term outcome. I believe it is a short-term outcome because you have to ask people, you have to measure the satisfaction. But I don't think it is a very meaningful outcome to measure, like overall satisfaction. What does it give me when I have to make an evaluative judgment? But if you have to measure it, then be specific, very specific about what aspect of the program you are asking people's satisfaction about. Because people may rate, if you ask like, how did the training go for you? Overall, how much you are satisfied? We don't know what criteria they are using, right? They may use food as a criteria, or the teaching method as a criteria, or the duration of the training as a criteria. So be specific, very specific about what aspect of satisfaction, like what part of the program are you asking about?
Or they might just be mad at the chairs and give you like a low score, like I hated the chairs. So
overall, I have found satisfaction, like in my programs, they didn't give me like a very meaningful evaluative data. I have not used satisfaction data to make any judgments until now. So it's up to you all to kind of make a decision whether you want to ask about satisfaction or not. So examples of outcomes, the short-term learning immediately after the program, awareness, knowledge, perceptions, attitudes, skills, opinions, aspirations, motivations. Behavioral intention is short-term, but the behavior itself is medium-term. Sometimes behavior, practice, like adoption of what we are teaching, and making decisions, right? Making decisions and using it is a medium term, a short term. Then policies. The policies are two different types. There is some policies which affect a smaller unit. So then it becomes like a short term. But if it's a big, like we call it a small p or a capital P kind of thing, depends on how much impact it is making policy. So those are the outcomes. And this is an example before we get into our activity like indicators. So this is just an example. This is from University of Wisconsin Extension website. So the project itself is focused on building capacity in program evaluation in a local evaluation project. I'm not going to read everything. I think it's kind of, you can see, I just highlight the important things. So the under inputs, it is like the staff who will work on this building capacity of the local extension evaluation partners, then the money, right? And then the research that goes into it, all of these are inputs. Under outputs, again, as I said, it's like activities and the people who you reach out to. So activities, needs assessment, then developing materials, then providing technical assistance, one-on-one assistance. So these are all activities, some of the activities. And then the reach, the coalition partners, the Department of Health, the Wisconsin Tobacco Control Board, Central Research, Tobacco Research Institute. So these are all the clients. And then the outcomes, the anticipated outcomes, short term, the people will increased valuing of evaluation, and increased involvement in evaluation planning. So I brought out the first point, the increased valuing of evaluation. I think it is really difficult to measure something like what is valuing of evaluation means. So if you want to ask that, then you have to operationally define what exactly does valuing mean for your context. So I wanted to bring out that one. So Wisconsin people, they have it as a short-term outcome, but I would either avoid it or be very clear how to measure it. Like how do you define valuing for this context? Then the medium-term outcome, increased number of correlations, right? So that is the behavior part. So people have increased the number of correlations. Then integration of evaluation into the operations. So they are using the evaluation information, right? So that is the medium term. And what is the long-term or impact? Overall increased local evaluation capacity. More effective programs are resulting as a result of the good evaluation plans in their programs. And that will lead to improved outcomes. Overall, Wisconsin Tobacco Control Board goals are being effectively met, and we are able to measure them clearly. So this is an example. Now a little bit about indicators before we break into the activity. So indicators are the evidence or information to answer your questions, right? Okay, you have these intended outcomes, but what exactly do you want to ask in the data collection? The indicators can be seen, like you observe, or can be heard, like you ask people, like to what extent did you increase your knowledge, right? Before attending the program and after attending the program. Then they can be read. Those are the secondary data. The agency records that I told are really important. Secondary data is as important as primary data. And then the indicators can be felt, the climate of a meeting, but you have to clearly write down if you are talking about such an abstract thing like climate of a meeting, you have to clearly write down what made you make the judgment, whether it's a positive, negative, or whatever it is. Touched and smelled, like food science evaluation projects, those two indicators are more applicable, less so to a traditional extension education program. And then this is really, really important. I will spend a little bit of time on this, what indicators should be, so that you are very clear when you are writing your questions. So it should be direct in the sense that it has to measure as directly as possible what you are intending to measure. For example, if the outcome you are trying to measure is reduction in teen smoking, right? The best indicator is a number and percentage of teens smoking, right? But sometimes people may ask the number and percentage of teens that attend a counseling session, right? So that may be okay data to collect, but just attending a session doesn't give you like how many people have changed. So that is like collect direct data. Think about it. So then specific, the question has to be framed very specifically so that everyone can understand it in the same way. Like I was talking about it previously, right, a little bit ago. So for example, indicator, like if you ask number and percentage of farmers who adopted a particular risk management practice, it is not very clear. You have to be very specific which risk management practice, right? So that is where the specific nature of the indicator comes out. Then useful, right? Again, what kind of a decision you can be able to make, like what recommendation can you make? So the indicator has to help us understand what we are measuring in a complete sense. Then practical, there are costs involved with every data collection, right? Even though sometimes there may be an indicator that is the best one to answer our question, but from a practical sense, the cost of collecting the data should not exceed the utility of the information collected for. If the decision that you'll make is, for example, for like in a money sense, if that is not more significant than the money you're investing in the evaluation activity, you have to think about it. So, however, reasonable costs are to be expected and have to be budgeted, right? So that kind of a practical thing has to be considered. Then adequate is like really important. More, like almost all the time, we need more than one indicator to answer our question, right? There is no standard rule, like how many indicators is good. You have to think and decide for your own context. But a rule of thumb is, if you need more than 5 indicators to answer your question, then maybe the thing that you are trying to tackle is too complex and it needs 2 different programs. So 1 to 5 is a rule of definitely more than 1, but less than 5. Like it's not like a rigid or a correct kind of a number, but overall, if you are requiring more than 5 indicators, then maybe it's too complex program and it needs 2 different programs. And then, as I said, culturally appropriate. Like there may be sometimes some questions which you may not be able to ask in a particular context or even the data collection method. So that also has to be thought about. So now for the next 3 slides, before we break into the activity, what we'll do is, so there are the 3 questions that I selected. So there are 4 indicators. Maybe you can share which among those indicators are correct or will give us like more relevant information, like more valid. So the question is, are people better controlling purple loose strife as a result of the land and water education program? So the 4 choices, the data collection, like the indicators, are reduction in number of acres in loose strife strands, or % of landowners participating in loose strife control efforts. The next one is number of brochures distributed. And the last one is number of people attending program representations on loose strife. So which of these, like, is there 1 or 2 indicators that you think are more relevant to collect to answer this question? Like anyone can unmute and just share.
What do you think?
There are, like, for me, like, I identified two of the 4 are good to measure, according to me. So
Maybe the top 2, that's like better at the actual impact of the program.
yeah, that's what I have. The reduction in number of acres and the number and percentage of landowners participating. It will give us correct kind of data to answer our questions, right? Number of brochures distributed doesn't give us directly any evidence. A number of people attending the programs also is not that good of an indicator. So you are all able to see the question, right? It's big enough font. Or should I read out?
Hispanic youth volunteering.
So there are again like 2, I think, are directly related to what we are trying to answer. Does anyone want to share what those 2 are? Maybe 3 if you feel 3, whatever. Are Hispanic youth volunteering in the same proportion as other youth in the 4-H programs?
Go for it.
I feel like you need to know the first and the third point to answer that question.
Yeah, that's what I had. 2 and 4, I don't think are that much directly related, right? And the last question, just practice before we break into activity. How do master gardeners contribute to the alleviation of hunger? Again, I identified 2 as giving direct and relevant data for us.
Go for it. Say it loud.
I think number 4, I'm still not sure what is the like responsibility of master gardeners, but I think one is number 4.
Mhm. Okay. Actually, I had 1 and 2, number and percentage of master gardeners who give food away. Is directly related to what we are trying to measure, and amount of food donated. But again, it depends on context and also the evaluative question. But for this purpose, I had 1 and 2. Because what I felt about number 4 was number of gardening requests answered by master gardeners may not give us what they're doing with that, right? Okay, they're answering your requests, but what the people are using it for, like does the behavior change happen or not? We don't know, like to what extent it may contribute to elevation of hunger.
So just because they're asking questions doesn't mean that they're changing their.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's what I have.
They're tricky. They are really always hard. Christina?
But also, you can't assume that because the master gardeners keep the food away, that contributes to alleviation of hunger. So we,
Yeah, so do we have to be more specific, Vikram, like number and percent of master gardeners who give healthy food to
Yeah.
like CSA or to food banks or something?
Yeah.
Oh,
Again, like the context is very important for it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think you're right, that we could be, and all of them could probably be adjusted to make them work, right? Like number and percent of low income families that garden after learning from a master gardener, right, would be a better number 3.
Yeah.
Or does that make it too complex?
Yeah. Okay, I think you all got what an indicator is, right? So we'll move to the next activity. So this is just an example of a parent education program. So these are all the inputs, outputs, outcomes. And then the last row, the indicators, right? For each of these, like for example, at the outcomes level, to what extent did knowledge increase? And did they learn new approaches? What else happened as a result of attending the this program? The expected outcomes short term were parents increase knowledge of child development, and parents learn new ways to discipline their kids, right? So the evaluative questions there were to what extent did knowledge increase, and did they learn new approaches, right? And the indicators is number of people and percentage of people who increase the knowledge of these outcomes. So what I want you to do for the next 10 minutes or so is to think about a program that you want to develop and evaluate. And for this particular activity, do not focus, like you can think about outputs, just select one outcome, like whether short term or medium term, and then think what indicators will give you the data. And then the data collection, we'll use the same example next week, what methods you'll use. So just spend the next 10 minutes thinking about a program that you want to develop, and then what outcomes may be possible in short or medium term, and then come up with some indicators that will give you like what questions you'll ask. So I can leave this slide, but the next slide I had was just this template. Like you don't need to use this template, but just in your computer or paper, whatever, just write down a couple of outcomes for a program, write down the name of the program, then a couple of outcomes, and then the indicators to answer those outcomes. How will you measure those outcomes? So is that clear?
Think of like a workshop maybe, or yeah, some small program related to what it is you do, your research does.
So this is, you don't
Want me
need
to send the Zoomers away to talk, or like, are we doing it individually and then chatting about it?
Yeah, so I was thinking like now it is 9:55, right? So people can work until 10:05, and then for 5 minutes they can, like some volunteers can share, and then last 10 minutes we can leave for questions.
Perfect. Okay.
So I'm going to go back to the previous slide so you can see what examples are for an outcome and an indicator, but please come up with whatever program you are thinking about, or like some hypothetical program. Like keep it very simple. I just want you to kind of think about short-term and medium-term outcome and indicators for those two. Like just to come up with one outcome for each level, that's sufficient. Name of the program. Then for now, don't focus on inputs and outputs. You know, right, what you do, but just write down the outcomes.
Short-term, medium-term outcomes and how you would know. I always think this is hard, but that's doable.
We'll give it a couple more minutes and then people can start sharing. So we are at 10 minutes. So anyone wants to share the name of the program, a couple of outcomes they anticipate happening as a result of their efforts, and what are the indicators they'll use to measure those outcomes?
Great ones, go Peter.
So mine was for like an animal vaccination campaign. And wait, did you want inputs also or just output? So for inputs, it's like everything you need for vaccination, vaccines, syringes, needles, but then vets or community animal health workers and some training materials to explain to farmers. The immediate output would just be the number of vaccinated animals, which also for the indicator, it could be measured in number of vaccines administered if we're vaccinating for multiple diseases. And so then in terms of short-term outcomes, you know, it's just the number of animals that are protected against the diseases we're vaccinating against. And hopefully, you know, farmers who participated in having increased understanding of vaccination and disease in the medium term, having a reduced incidence of that disease among the farmers who are involved, and hopefully also reduce zoonotic transmission of disease. And in the long term, hopefully this would expand to reduced community transmission of disease, and increase farmers vaccinating for like giving their animals all recommended vaccines, and an increased income from animal production because of less like loss of productivity.
Yeah, that's a great example. Anyone else?
You can tell that Peter's done logic models before. That was good.
Yeah.
One other brave soul. All right, thanks, Margo.
So the outcomes that I was thinking about like a regenerative ag workshop kind of demonstration week, and for short-term outcomes, I was looking for regenerative practices enacted, so like cover cropping, grazing, no-till, just like little changes that people can make. And then medium-term outcomes, I was looking for just like more farms registered as regenerative. And then the questions that I would be asking for those would be how many farmers began one or more new regenerative practices since the workshop, and then how many farmers have been registered as regenerative.
Okay, that's very good.
That's very good.
Anyone last volunteer before?
Thanks, Christina. Yeah, now we'll have a diverse perspective.
So I was thinking of like SNAP Ed, which is like the education component of people that receive SNAP, so like federal food assistance. And their goal is to teach people how to like shop and cook for healthy meals. So I was thinking short term, like they're just focused on education. So like an indicator could just be like some kind of quiz maybe to just test like the knowledge base that people have. But then more medium and long term, the hope is maybe to like increase the food quality that people consume. And then maybe you could do some kind of evaluation of food consumption, like, I don't know, either a dietary recall, or if you have like the data of their purchases or consumptions, things like that. And then very, very long term, maybe like decrease like prevalence or incidence of like non-communicable disease. Yeah, so I can.
That's great. Good job.
Yeah, very good. Yeah,
Very
thank you.
good.
Yay, they're experts now, Vikram.
Okay, so there are like really good examples. In interest of time, I'll just share the last slide and open it up for questions. So the last slide is just all the evaluation trainings that we offer. As I said, like I'm the extension evaluation capacity building leader for the cooperative action system. So we have a team of 4 people. Each of us leads one of these topics. And in addition to these are all on my website, the webpage, department webpage, all the YouTube links. If you're interested, we'll talk about data collection methods next week. And then we do like some other topics also, but these are the trainings that we offer every year. So if you want to watch any of these YouTube videos, you can find them on my webpage. UC Davis webpage, the department faculty page. So this is what I wanted to share today. So this is all the bibliography that I used for today's presentation. I think I'll share this with Amanda, and then you can read any of these. And as I said, if you are interested in career in evaluation, then reading Michael Patton's utilization focused approach will be like a good one to start with. And then all of these. And then if you have any questions after today also, you can always reach out to me via email. And this is what I had to share today. So I'll stop sharing, and we can spend the last few minutes answering, like discussing anything you want or asking any questions you have.
Go, Margot.
I have a question. In your role in evaluation, do you typically train extension researchers to do the evaluation, or do you partner with them and do the evaluation for their project?
Yeah, in my current role, it's more capacity building. I'm expected to teach people how to do evaluations. But I have students, my lab, my group, like I have to be part of grant proposals also, because that's one of the criteria for faculty, right? So if a program requires me to carry out the evaluation for them, then my students will do it if the people have budget, and that's also limited capacity. So overall, like I'm doing evaluation capacity building, not doing evaluations for people, but in my previous job before I came here, it was more practice. Like I was part of an evaluation team that used to carry out evaluations for the funders. And there was some evaluation capacity building component also. In any way, like even if I'm doing the evaluation for people, I still meet with people, right? During the data interpretation stage, I said, and I take a participatory approach. So I do some capacity building in every interaction that I have with people, like why I'm choosing this method, or why do you think like this statistical analysis will give us the correct result? So there is some evaluation capacity building happening in that also.
Thank you.
Go, Peter.
So I guess this is sort of a general question about evaluation, but I think something that is always sort of that, I haven't found a good answer on is for evaluations that are more targeted at behavior change. So less of like did people learn this? Did they, we have a tangible output, but it's more of like, we want to target a behavior change. How do you measure that accurately? And also, how do you avoid the pitfall of people learn the right answers and so they tell you what you want to hear?
Yeah.
So for behavior change, to get at behavior change, we need to follow up with people. Like if you do like any program, right, like extension education or research, if you collect data right after the event or your program, you'll get, most likely you'll get a short-term change or behavioral intention, right? But to get at behavior change, you have to follow up with the people, usually after 6 months is what we recommend. But it depends on the practice that you taught, right? The behavior, some behaviors may take more time, or some behaviors can be realized in less than 6 months. And then again, there has to be multiple methods is the best, because if you send out a survey, follow-up survey, that's a self-reported behavior change. So we don't know like the fidelity of implementation, like to what extent, how they are adopting whatever you taught. So if you have another method like going to the fields and observing what they're doing, like for example, if it's an ag-related practice, right, you teach, if the behavior change is happening, you have to follow up and then collect both self-reported and like observation data, just to see if they, or to what extent they're doing it. And then the teaching method has to be appropriately developed. If behavior change is what you are targeting, which is what extension education programs are expected to do, then you have to have a good teaching design.
Yeah, but it's, you have to really think through it because you can fall into some pitfalls, right? Like if you measure too soon, they may not have had time, or like if there's other barriers standing in their way, like they need to purchase something, right? Then you need to like understand.
And also the other thing that I always recommend is, some people don't do it. If you ask people like, are you adopting this after you attended the program, like you reach out to them, for example, 6 months or 8 months afterwards, and ask them. If they say no, it's always good to ask why you are not adopting it, because the automatic assumption that they are not knowledgeable or they did not understand fully, it may not be the case all the time, or most of the times. There may be some other barriers which will be preventing them from adopting whatever you taught in your program or you recommended in your program. So if we can identify those factors, maybe another other education program is needed to do that. Or sometimes they are beyond the scope of what we can do. Then there's really nothing much we can do. Like we can at least know why it is not possible, and maybe we should refocusing our effort on something else.
Hi, I have a quick question.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I was wondering if most states' cooperative extension programs have someone like you on staff. Like, how common is it for there to be a Vikram in each state?
It's not like very common, but even like most of the states now are having an evaluation specialist, but people are hired at different types of roles. Some are staff, some are faculty. But evaluation capacity building, the evaluation specialists with the sole responsibility of evaluation capacity building, like me, may not be there in every state, but there is some evaluation presence. And there are some states, like for example, I am part of the Western Region Evaluation Network, and Wyoming doesn't have an evaluation specialist. Hawaii doesn't have an evaluation specialist, like not even like for carrying out evaluations or for teaching evaluation or for evaluation capacity building. There is no evaluation specialist. Even in our UC extension system, I'm the only person who has this title, like associate professor of extension and evaluation specialist title. The other three people who are part of our team, the ECB, the evaluation capacity building team, they are like they're knowledgeable in evaluation, they're experienced. So we teach it together. But even in a very big system which cuts across so many campuses, I'm the only evaluation specialist in the state.
Yeah. It's very frustrating.
It would be handy to have more of you.
I agree. We all agree.
And most of the places that I know, the evaluation capacity building leaders, if they have like a staff, academic staff appointment, they don't do any research. For me, because it's a faculty appointment, 40% of the time is for research, and my research is focused on evaluation methods. And then the 40% is for teaching, and then 20% is university service.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and what we know about evaluation, right, relies on researchers who research evaluation. There aren't that many of them. There's a handful though, but yeah, not as many.
So if any of you wants to kind of see what exactly is in store for evaluation field, explore the American Evaluation Association website, and if possible, attend one of their conferences. There are like so many topical interest groups is what they call. There are like 30 of them. Like one of them is like extension education evaluation. There is like one for environmental education. There is one for LGBTQ evaluation, one for environmental justice, community development, whatnot, everything like for arts evaluation. So if you want to pursue a career in evaluation, that would be a good first step.
I'll put a link to that. They the student membership to the American Evaluation Association is very inexpensive.
Yeah.
And they even have these, the meetings are giant. They're like thousands of people. But they do have these little coffee hours and stuff that they do webinars on evaluation. But yeah, it's very interesting. Most of the evaluators are like professional evaluators, but there's a small contingent of university ones that come to the meeting. Very good meeting. Giant. It's the biggest meeting I've ever been to.
Yeah, like 3,000 people.
Yeah.
I
I haven't been to one of those for a long time. But
Yeah.
Very good.
It's in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Yeah. All right, well, we've hit 10:20, but we'll see you on Monday. So if you have questions over the weekend, please think of them. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for inviting.
And yeah, we'll see you on Monday and we'll see you all on Monday. Thank you, Vikram.
Bye.